Welcome back to the Changemaker podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. My guest today is Wendi Swanson. We've been trying to get together for so long, Wendi. But Wendi is a leader of change in an executive consultant and implementer role for over 25 years. She's passionate about working with executive leaders to develop high potential teams and organizational growth strategies. She enjoys getting to the root cause of what's holding teams back and implementing a model for change, so many other things, but I just want to jump right in. Welcome, Wendi. We're so happy to have you here.
Welcome to the Changemaker podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Thank you so much, Deke. It's a pleasure.
So I told you before coming on there that I'm so excited. So this is my first interview since getting back my somewhat normal voice after a year of laryngitis associated with esophageal cancer. So I'm now 8 months cancer-free, have my voice back, and I get to talk to you.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'm glad to be your first interview. I've been looking forward to this for a while. So
well, let's jump right in. So you're a change manager. You help teams with change and everything, management with change. I want to ask you this question because it seems like, so I wrote a book called The Changemaker, The Art of Building Better Leaders. That's what I kind of do is initiate change. But even after COVID, it seemed to me that there are a lot of people in leadership positions that are like, but we've always done it this way, and sort of cling to the status quo. And I'm like, there is no status quo anymore. It's just our entire lives have been disrupted. And I'm like, if you don't adjust to or manage change, you're going to get run over by it.
That's right. Yeah, so a lot of the work that I do, Deke, has been in retail, and you want to talk change.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I joke, but it's not joking. You change or you die.
Yeah.
And if you stay the same, everyone else is getting better and everyone else is changing.
Yeah.
And Deke, we've never been here that we have 33% of the labor force that has not come back after COVID.
Yeah.
So, if we aren't looking at things differently and if we aren't doing things differently, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, AI, just think about what's happened even in the last 6 months with AI.
Yeah. It's crazy.
We've never been here and we'll never be here again.
Well, and I know that change is scary for some folks. It's probably scary for everybody. I happen to kind of like it because it gives life a variety.
Yeah.
But really, it is, as you say, I mean, disruptions are happening in our society faster than they ever have before.
That's right.
And the whole AI thing, but I tell people, so it's, I want to get set in my ways or whatever. I'm like, if we're not willing to evolve, and that's what I look at it more as, we're evolving as people. Yeah. As you say, it's either change or die.
Yeah.
So in really the retail industry, what are some of the trends that you're seeing?
Oh, that is the question of the day for sure. You hear a lot in the media that, I work specifically with brick and mortar retail stores. Mm-hmm. I don't work with the multi-channel, I don't work with the whole experience of e-commerce and how to make that consistent in the stores. I work specifically with the stores around the customer experience. And, it's so funny, Deke, because the first question people ask is, but brick and mortar retail is dead.
No.
And oh no, especially since COVID, we have more people coming back to the stores, the brick and mortar stores than we have. And the people who are coming in are more educated because they have the internet, they've done some research. And so we have more intender traffic than we've ever had. And so one of the biggest changes that we are seeing is it used to be, especially in luxury goods, in high-end ticket purchases, consumers would go to anywhere from 3 to 5 stores because they just kind of wanted to experience the product. Well, now they do the research before they even come into the store. And when they choose a store, that's where they want to be. And I think that's the biggest change that we're seeing. And so training has
Yeah.
become more important than it's ever been. And yet I see a lot of retailers who are backing down from training because of what's happening with the labor force. And so what's happening is we have more customers coming into the store. They have a higher intention, and yet we have less people who are trained and just less people overall. So there's this huge disparity between what the consumer's expectations are and what retailers are delivering.
It's interesting that you say that. So my wife has a lifestyle center that her father started. He passed a number of years ago. You would be very proud of her. She's done really well. It's called Surrey Center here in Augusta.
Okay.
But the traffic there, I mean, you can barely find a parking place there. So it's a mix of shops and restaurant. It's mainly local, but I mean, I can just see it in that situation. But like we've got a niece and her family that live in Atlanta. She waits to shop until she comes to Augusta to go to Surrey Center. But so much of it, particularly with lifestyle centers, it's about the experience.
That's right. And that's another one of the biggest changes that we're seeing is, it used to be that people would go and shop and then maybe they'd go to the movies, maybe go out to eat. And
Yeah.
that's completely changed because now with the lifestyle centers, people are going out to eat, they're going to movies, and then maybe they'll shop. And so there's this it's become part of our experience versus, I just want to go in, I just want to buy something. Obviously that still exists. That's why some of the I don't know. Have you heard of Shields Sporting Goods?
I have. Not very knowledgeable, but I've heard about them.
They've created this culture of experience.
Yeah.
All of their people, they're well trained, they have product knowledge, and they are one of the very few sporting goods organizations that is growing versus closing stores. So the experience is everything.
Well, it's interesting. I had a conversation with the professor at Augusta University the other day. He brought in several people. He was about to do a speaking engagement based on what is the value of a university education, because not everybody needs it. But I said I will tell you that. So I a friend of mine that I went to the University of Georgia with. He said my son's a senior in college and he needs a mentor. If you'll talk to him. And I'm like, man, we hung out in college. You wouldn't have said that when we were hanging out together at, 18, 19 years old at the University of Georgia. But I spoke to his son and he said, this online learning needs to go away. He said, because kids are using AI to, write papers and everything. But I told the professor, I said, that is one thing, to be in person on a college campus, to face actually deal with people that might not look like you or think like you or act like you. That's how you build leadership skills, but it's how you build the soft skills to use in retail. I mean, nothing is going to ever take the place, I don't think, of face-to-face engagement.
Yeah,
And somebody's like, well, AI is going to take over the world. I said, no, because you can't program a soul, and souls are important.
that's right. Well, and we were created for community. So I think if we've learned
Exactly.
anything, that's what we've learned is we're hungry for that. And even, I have friends who call themselves extreme introverts. And even my extreme introverts are like, I need people. And
Yeah.
I believe that's a soul connection. I agree 100%.
Well, and it's funny what I've found, and I very much cross engage younger generational leaders. But so
Hmm.
many people say, well, they can't talk to each other. They're always on their phones.
Yeah.
I'm like the ones. So I spoke at Georgia College recently, a couple weeks back, for their annual leadership forum. So I met with a small group of students beforehand, and then a big room of about 100 people, and then dinner with a small group of students. But it was so interesting to me. 90% of them were female, probably 100, kids, students in these leadership programs going from freshmen to seniors.
Hmm.
But their questions were so good and they were so engaged in just that opportunity to have dinner with them. It was just, but I'm like, if you take the time to talk to any generation,
Yeah.
people really appreciate conversations. But if you just write out, and in retail, you've got to change. You've got a whole new generation of consumers coming up. But just to write them off and say, well, they don't know how to communicate, I'm like, why don't you try maybe?
Right. Well, in that, you know, one of the things that I love that you talk about, Deke, is rallying people around a cause.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can rally people around a cause, but the clue to that is people
Yes.
and that connection and that, you know, there's just not a lot of people who are investing in other people from a leadership perspective. And you know, it's sad, Deke. You know, the last workshop I did on leadership, one of the things that I do is I have them start out and I say, so I want you to list somebody who is truly a leader in your life. And it's sad because I get these looks like, what? And then to push to the next step and say, okay, now that, you know, hopefully everybody has at least one name, some people can't even come up with one. And, you know, then I have them write down the characteristics of that leader. And it's sad that we don't have a
No.
big list of people that we go, oh yeah, it was a coach. Oh yeah, it was a teacher. Or, you know, we're just, you know, to rally people around a cause, we got to stand up and we got to invest in people. And I just don't see that very often. And I'm curious what you see when you're going to these universities talking to young people.
You know, I will tell you, because we're going to get real deep here, which I love
I
getting deep.
love it. Oh, good.
But seeing, you know, the students at Georgia College, it's a really good school. I met with the provost that said it's really like, it feels like a private school, but it's a public school. Payment. But that that is a great example of. But meeting with the professor I don't believe at Augusta University we have any leadership programs. I'm like, every university, because seeing, you know, that's 100 kids. But I will say the same thing. I said, okay, well, you know, I'm 56. When I was coming along, there were people in both parties. I'm a reformed politician. I never really was a politician, but that I'd be like, okay, they're statesmen. You know, I can look up to that man or woman. I'm like, for kids wanting to go into public service now, where are those leaders to emulate? But a cool thing is, so the director of the leadership programs at Georgia College, the next day when I met him for coffee, said, I guarantee you there are going to be a bunch of those students that you spoke to last night that are going to run for office just because you took the time to engage them. So I'm like, that's, you know, that's what I'm passionate about. And I'm like, I'm 56, and so many people can be afraid across generations. I'm like, I'm not. I'm like, I've had my time, and now it's time for me to teach and to mentor and to invest. So I'll tell you, this is kind of cool. So I've got a team together, and we're sort of retooling. Part of a stronger focus of the podcast is going to be on highlighting established and emerging young leaders. I call them young leaders because I don't want to say Gen Z or whatever, millennials.
Yeah.
I'm like, all those
Take the
labels.
label away.
But but so but apparently nobody is really doing that. And they're out there. I mean, I mentor young people across the United States, but in doing my own self-analysis of why this is important to me, I'm like, because I was them. So I think about, you know, these young 20-something-year-olds that had to go through the COVID lockdowns and what a traumatic experience that was. Apparently, from the research I did, the age range worldwide, not just in the US, that was most impacted by COVID were 18 to 24-year-olds.
Hands down.
And so we're going to be dealing with that for years, but there's a certain loneliness to it too. And I'm like, okay, I want to validate you and highlight you if you're a young leader that's doing exceptional things out there, and let's build the community. But I'm like, okay, a week after my 25th birthday, I lost my mom to cancer, and I lost my first wife to suicide when I was 29. So I'm like, folks in your 20s, I know what it's like to go through adversity and trauma and to come out the other side, and let me help you, show you there is another side. And it's not just good stuff. It can be great stuff.
Yeah.
But I was also 37 years old when I offered myself to run for mayor. And everybody in town was like, we just have all these old people. We need younger people. And I'm like, okay, put my hand up. So I was called in a back room by the old guard and told that I was the best candidate, but that I hadn't paid my dues. So I was told not to run. And I'm like, look, I've run a small business. I've chaired boards of directors. I've gone through leadership programs. What is different between that and being mayor? So I didn't listen. But so I know what it's like for those generations to say, okay, people say they want our input, but then it's like, nah, I'm not really sure. Sit at the children's table. So I told the students at Georgia College, I'm like, I'm trying to expedite the process of getting you guys in decision-making positions because, frankly, particularly in politics, what we're seeing right now is just, it's a mess.
It's terrifying.
It is.
And,
But, but with what you do, the people you engage, and I get on my high horse, but I'm like, the world is not this terrible dystopian place if you're
no.
out there interacting with people, which
Mhm.
is, what you do. I mean, you're inspiring people, you're building, better leaders and everything. So the work you do is, to me, that's really cool and deserves some attention.
Thank
Maybe it
you.
doesn't fit with the media narrative that we're going to hell in a handbasket and that everybody on either side of the extremes is evil. But
Yeah.
tell me what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity at Deke to deliver management training, leadership training, sales training in 5 different languages. My most recent experience was in Russia. I was in Russia 14 times over 9 months in
Wow.
2018 and, well, a little bit in 2019, mostly 2018. And, it's interesting because in the US, we have our little, um, you know, we think that the way it is here is the way it is everywhere. And there are some common things.
Yeah.
One of the things that was super enlightening to me is for my son's senior trip, I was able to take him with me to Russia. I was working there. And so we stopped in Germany and we also went to Sweden. And, as we're traveling around Europe, here he is 18 years old and he just stops and he goes, Mom, we're really prideful. I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, it's no wonder people don't like Americans. Like we act like we're it. And there's this whole world out there that is
Yeah.
just, I mean, Russia was my Russian friends were some of the most accommodating clients I've ever had in my life. Some of the most hungry people I've ever had in my life, even about leadership.
Yeah.
You think about their culture and you think about, where they came from. And, if here I am preaching standards, and putting standards into your organization and leading change through people knowing what to do and how to do it, wanting to do it. And not managing change, leading change.
Yeah.
And I just had people looking at me like, I just got to get your autograph. And I'm like, I haven't written a book. I'm gonna, but, because it's just this message that I think sometimes, what I'm seeing out there, back to your original question, is, this us versus them, and this, I have to take a stand about something. And so I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'm going to take a stand, on social media. And,
Yeah.
I think
Crazy.
one of the best things that we can do as a nation, as a world, as a person is look at, what can I do for somebody else? I think there's so
Exactly.
much, what do I believe in? What's my cause? And that's what I love about you talking about rallying around a cause, is because it's rallying people. So first of all, what do I believe in? And then second of all, how can I impact others? And I'm seeing more and more people in organizations focusing even on, when you talk about becoming the leader that I want to be,
Yeah.
getting away from title and really understanding
Yes.
I have personal responsibility for my development, and I have personal responsibility for others' development, whether it's a colleague
Exactly.
or whether it's somebody who works for me or with me, or, I am seeing more and more of people who are stepping out and wanting to invest, and yet not really knowing where to start, how to do
Exactly.
it. And I encourage people as change leaders to just take a step, just sit down and have a conversation with not just the people who work for you, your colleagues, be a learner, and just,
Exactly.
just take the step and have a conversation, because that's where it all starts.
Well, it's and two, I mean, I'm sure you're finding this, you're going worldwide, but I don't exist in a silo. Every place I
That's right.
go, I'm I'm at the grassroots level, talking to
That's right.
people where they are.
Yeah.
The world is hungry for hope,
Hungry.
and I'll tell you a sad story though, and I won't get too far into politics, but at dinner at Georgia College after my speech, I had an 18-year-old girl, wide-eyed, wants to go to work in Washington, and she was so excited. She said, "I'm 18 years old and I get to vote in the presidential election for the first time this year. Do you have any advice for first-time voters?" I said, "Well, I'm afraid if it ends up being what it might end up being, then I don't know that you've got a choice that's going to excite you." And I said, "Actually, I feel kind of bad for an 18-year-old girl basically having to choose between two 80-year-old men.
Mm,
How when particularly, 90% of the people in the 100
mm,
people in that room were female." And I'm like, "We're their inspiration." But it's counterintuitive. I think people are so sick of the negativity and everything, and that if you can
yeah.
give them hope,
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it's in Russia or wherever,
That's right.
they're like, "Thank you, thank
Yes.
you, I need
Yes.
this."
Yeah.
That's what they're like. Yes, they want your autograph, but I'm like, but there are more people, and that's sort of what I'm trying to do is
Yeah.
people like that. There are more of us than there are of the people that are really negative extremists,
Hmm.
but it's just uniting those tribes. And I'm just an old hippie at heart, and I tell people, okay, God got me through
Hmm.
esophageal cancer,
Hmm.
literally no side effects whatsoever. I was going to the gym 5 and 6 times a week. Yeah, I never felt bad, no hair loss, no weight loss, but I'm like, I'm a walking miracle, and miracles do happen.
Miracles do happen. Well, and I think that's another thing that's so important in leadership is our faith. And I appreciate that you are a man of faith and that you share that.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I'll tell you, Wendy, we were meant to connect today. You were
We
meant to be my
were.
first guest that I can interview with my voice.
Mm,
But so I tell people it's even leadership. I viewed going through treatment as leadership. I'm like,
mm,
okay, God has given me a spirit of peace and calm, which cancer is extremely scary. And a lot of people, unfortunately, just sort of check out because it
yeah.
is so scary. But to be in the midst of a room with other people for 4.5 hours, you know, no distractions,
Mm,
and be able to share light and everything. So my wife, I still go to immunotherapy once a month. So she always goes and gets Chick-fil-A breakfast biscuits for everybody. But to be able to be in that situation, but I was like, when I first started, I'm like, this is my team. This
mm,
is my team, and I'm going to keep them lifted up and psyched up and everything. And so, I mean, one great experience. So I pray every day. I'm like, Lord, through all the blessings and just everything, the grace that you've bestowed upon me, just use me as a vessel to magnify, amplify, multiply, and sanctify those blessings so that I can share them abundantly with other people.
mm,
So I was in the nurses station one day, and so a young man sitting next to me goes, "Aren't you Deke Copenhaver? Didn't you used to be the mayor?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man." He's like, "Man, I love you. My wife loves you. My family loves you.
mm.
Can I get a picture made with you?" And then an older gentleman there for the first time is like, "I know who you are. I agree with him." But it was just like this spontaneous combustion of positive energy. I'm like, "We're in it together, man. I got your back." We're like high fiving and, fist bumping. But I'm like, that's a manifestation of that. But
That's right.
I'd say people will go to positive energy if you provide it for them,
Hmm.
but it's not always easy if you're looking for, I mean, if you're not out there doing what you're doing or what
Yeah.
I do and intersecting with people, it's like the world is just not this terrible place.
Yeah. Well, and there is so much hope. I when I do consulting, I have a 4 to 8 month process, and I've been working in Canada, process. Either way. In the first meeting, I oftentimes will have people who literally come up to me and say, I can't do this. This is more than, I am not a leader. I know that I have a management title. No one else wanted a management title, and they want to walk out. And the
Yeah.
reason that I've done what I've done for as many years as I have, and I've left my family and, jumped on airplanes every Monday morning, is by the end of that project, the people who actually stay in come to me with tears in their eyes because they had never had the opportunity to be invested in.
Yeah.
And it just proves the hunger that we have and the hope that we have that, as a, I can move from a manager to a leader,
Yeah.
even just by investing in myself, can I become a better listener? Can I become a better communicator? Can I develop more self-awareness?
Yes.
EI has become such a big thing. And, just the hope in something,
Well, and
it's powerful.
it is tremendously powerful, but it's funny. So I test drive, where we're sort of taking the podcast with younger people I come across. But my new Forbes book rep, who's out of New York City,
Mm.
she's 20 something years old, but I was telling her about what we're going to, she's like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. She said, my generation's not lazy. The
No,
older generations just don't know where to find us, and
that's
they
right.
don't know to talk to, how to talk to us where we are. And
Yeah.
I'm like, so bam, that's what we're doing. But every generation can learn from the next generation or the
Oh,
generation before, which is
oh,
so cool to me. I mean, just the lessons you can learn. And I'm like, for us to have had the life experiences to willingly share with generations and say, look, we've been through these pitfalls and everything, and maybe you want to avoid this or maybe you want to do that. But these upcoming generations, and I bet you can see it in your son, they've been, and it goes back into the retail thing, they've been marketed to their entire lives.
yeah.
And so their BS detectors are very well developed. But like speaking to the students at Georgia College, I'm like, I hope that you see that I sincerely want to help your generation, to lift them up, to encourage them, and to empower you.
Yeah. Well, I think about my son, and, he has just entered the workforce. He's 24 years old. And, um, I think about this generation and the sense of community.
Yeah.
And he was so, so, so blessed because he's a baseball player. He was a college baseball player.
Oh, really?
He got very close to being drafted. He was supposed to be drafted last July. It didn't happen. He had the worst year he has ever had since
Oh,
8 years
I'm sorry
old. He
about
had
that.
three people he was on their list, the Giants, and two other, I don't even remember who the teams were. But, he now is working for a human capital management software company out of Oklahoma City. And Deke, their salespeople, they only hire people who have been in collegiate athletics. They
Yeah.
have competed at the college level. And I said, Grayson, what does that look like? And he said, Mom, think about it. They know what it's like to be a team. They know what accountability is like. They know what it's like to win. They know what it's like to lose. They know what it's like to overcome adversity. They
Yeah.
understand that with adversity comes innovation, because think about what
Exactly.
happened. They got an extra year, thankfully, during COVID. You just think about how aligned this team is, even day one.
Yep.
Like, part of his interview process was, after 4 interviews, he got to, stand up in front of his team and do a presentation on who he was and why he was going to be a great part of their team. And they ultimately got to choose whether or not he got hired.
And I'll get into this. So it's amazing to me, particularly politically, but we reward bad behavior. It's like, some politician will behave in a bad way,
Yeah.
and then they'll get negative press, at least from one side or the other. Then they send out a fundraising email, and I'm like, so you're profiting off of dysfunction.
Mm,
But I'm like, it's kind of like with saying that, I want to focus on emerging leaders.
yeah.
So people know it's It kind of drives me crazy. And I spoke to the students at Georgia College, but it's like social influencers in the younger generation.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, if you're basing your total self worth off of the number of likes you get or the number of followers you get,
Yeah.
that's saccharine because somebody's always going to have more followers, more likes. But let's lift up that generation, the people that are actually going out there and making a difference,
Yeah.
and doing something that's got substance to it. Let's validate the young people that are doing something of substance rather than having them validate themselves through something that's saccharine and will never be lasting.
It's so true. And this whole conversation of, well, their generation versus what does the individual have to bring to the table?
Yeah.
I do this exercise when I do a multi-generational workshop, and I have the traditionalists. I have a yes, I still use flip charts. I love my flip charts, and I divide it into two things. And I have people actually. The first group looks up the traditionalists, and they say, okay, what year were the traditionalists born, and then what was happening in the world during that time.
Yeah.
Therefore, the third category is how did they stayed in jobs forever. People didn't ever get divorced. I mean, there's this whole, and then you walk that all the way from the baby boomers to the Gen X to the Gen Y to the millennials and what we learn is when we go full circle is that every single generation, first of all, there's a reason they do what they do. And second of all, there's something that they give based on who they are. And if we just stop the finger pointing and just stop and go, wow, what can I give and what can I learn? Deke, imagine.
Oh, yeah. And Wendy, I want to share this quote with you if I can find it, because this just came from my visioning, but it was a quote from Socrates. Um, oh, basically, it was saying, the young people are lazy. All this, it was exactly, they love luxury. They don't respect their elders. This was Socrates, and so this
Mm,
generational bias is nothing new.
that's
But I'm
right.
like, I had mentors growing up, and my dad was my true north. My dad flew B-17 bombers in World War II.
Yeah.
At 18 years old, I'm like, that I lift up, those were teenagers.
Yeah.
So every generation has something to give, but it's like if we just write them off and say, well, they don't listen to me, I will give you a good example. So I've got a couple that are older that I know from a local watering hole. But I, they were talking about this young generation being lazy. Well, they don't have kids. But I said, well, what are you basing that on? They said, well, our friends' grandkids. I'm so like, so you're basing your opinion of a whole generation on, a couple 20 something year olds that you don't really have that much interaction with. But it's just like, don't go below the surface. And I
Yeah.
mean, there's so many of the young people that I know, our friends' kids, I'm like, they're go-getters. They love to travel. They've got a social
Yes.
conscience. I'm like,
Yes.
they're beautifully connected and creative. So
Mhm.
let's encourage them and they're different than we are. That's completely okay.
And
You
thank
know,
goodness.
yeah, and thank goodness our generation's different than the generations that came
That's
before us.
right.
There's something that makes them all unique,
That's right.
but it's just I think here again I'm like I think God got me through cancer for a reason, and I
Yeah.
think this is it
Yeah.
because I mean, we need communities built, and we need all this political stuff. Is just it is. I did a series of videos comparing cancer. I mean, comparing toxic polarization to cancer. I'm like anything that's dividing families and communities, and it's infecting businesses too.
Mm,
That's a cancer.
that's right.
And I kind of know from experience, but I'm also proof that you can come out the other side of that.
Yeah. Well, and you were able to see, I love what you said about, you were able to shine light in places you wouldn't ordinarily have been able to shine light had you have not gone through that.
No, definitely.
And I think I love, as you were talking, I was thinking about that's the true definition, I believe, of a leader. And that's someone who goes beyond um, just, I'm going to tell you, and it moves more into inspiration. Like they want to follow you because they're inspired, not because they have to. And I think that, John Maxwell, I love what he says. If you ever think that you're leading, just stop for a minute and look back. And is anybody following you? If they're not, you're just taking a walk. You're not leading.
No. Well,
And
I'll tell
so
you, go
you've been
ahead.
given an opportunity to lead in a very unique way.
Well, so I had a Zoom with some friends out of Europe not too long ago. I'm part of a sort of a mastermind group over there. But I said, I figured out that I'm not a motivational leader. I'm a motivational speaker. I'm an inspirational speaker.
That's right.
And my friend made a good point. He said, that's because, and I continue to use this, but I continue to give Chris Cooper in London credit for this. He said, because motivation lights a fire underneath you,
Mm.
inspiration lights a fire inside you.
Oh,
And so, inspiration, that fire inside people, they can share it with others and it keeps them going. You
yeah,
don't keep having to light that
that's right.
motivation underneath them. It's just inspiration is sustainable.
Yeah. Well, and inspiration is where influence comes from.
Exactly.
Because that's where we get away from this leadership as a title. Do it because I said so. Well, that's the easy way out.
Yeah.
Versus getting a team to do something because they're bought in, they understand why it's important, and they're inspired to do it. Well, that inspiration doesn't come because you have the title of leader. It becomes from your inspiration and who you are. And I want to follow you.
No, and that's an issue that I've seen with people in elected office. Is
Oh,
they get elected and they refer to themselves as a leader. And I'm like, no, you just won an election. And I would say it's impossible to lead by pandering to the extremes on either side. Because sort of to lead, you have to unite people. And if you're just pandering to extremes to get reelected,
yeah.
is that really leadership? So, you know, I've I'm glad I've got my voice back because I've got a lot to say, Wendy.
Oh, obviously, Deke. Well, and I want to tag on to something you just said. It may be leadership. What I'm going to go back to the original example I gave. When I have people write down someone who's been a leader in their life, and then for the people who can't think of a name to even write down, which again is sad, I have them open it up a little bit and I say, okay, so just think of a leader in the world.
Yeah.
And people say Walt Disney, people say, big names. And I say, interestingly enough, nobody said Hitler.
No.
Was Hitler a leader? Absolutely he was, because people followed him to their deaths. But
Yes.
nobody wants to talk about leaders who are leading in the wrong direction. They want to talk about leadership as this big, beautiful thing. And you know what? There's a big responsibility. And you think of politicians who are leading in the wrong direction. Yeah, they're leading.
And I'm gonna have to start wrapping it up here soon, but I want to give you this example. So I went to my niece's program at her school last Friday. So it's the Famous Faces program. So all the kids chose somebody, a historical figure, and they told why this is how I act justly, love kindness, and walk humbly with God.
Hmm.
And so they would say why the person they chose did that. And I'm like, that is such a wonderful thing. And it made me feel so good. And my niece chose a snowboarder, but it's like, but there was Barack Obama and George Bush and, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Muhammad Ali. But I'm like, this is just cool to see. But at the core of it, for them to make it about this is why this person is a leader because they exemplified these, examples.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever read the book Lead Like Jesus?
I have.
One of my favorites.
So Phyllis Hendry, that did operate the Lead Like Jesus ministry, used to live here in Augusta and is a dear friend. I think she's in Greenville now. But
Oh,
yeah,
you're kidding.
no. So I'm very very familiar. It's a go to.
So counterintuitive to our culture that leadership is about humility. And I
Yes.
love, one of the things that I have really tagged into is excuse me, you look at how Jesus led and how when he taught, he asked questions. He wasn't doing this.
No.
Well, like Elijah, why are you in there? Well, he knew why he was in there. He just
Yeah.
needed him to self-realize where he was and what his need was. And as leaders, the more we can ask questions and seek to understand and care enough about others and how we're going to impact this world around us by putting ourselves aside through that humility that you just talked about, and lead through humility, which then brings people along because they want to follow. Man, our world is hungry for that. So I appreciate so much, Deke, my time with you. This was definitely a divine meeting, and I'm grateful
No,
for
I
it.
I totally agree too, and I'm so glad that we connected, and we will continue the dialogue and stay connected because that's, as I say that, and that's part of what this show is about. That the mainstream media may show a distorted view of the world, but
That's
I'm
right.
like, but there are people all over the world
Mm.
like yourself that care, that have compassion, that want to see the world become a better place, which it can,
Yeah,
but we just have to continue to stand up.
that's
So,
right.
Wendy, I want to thank you so much for being with me, but I always ask my guests two questions at the end. Where can people find you?
Hmm.
Where
I
can
thought you were going to give me both at the same time.
that was a dramatic pause.
Yeah. The best place is my website, Edmond Group, ETYMON, edmondgroup.com. Also, I don't know if you have a place that we can post my email, and also just phone. I mean, people are welcome to just reach out via phone.
Yeah, well, we will put those in the liner notes. But okay, my last question on a daily basis: what brings a smile to your face and puts joy in your heart?
Just one.
Whatever.
Um, well, I'm going to narrow it down. I'm going to make it personal versus business. Watching my 24-year-old son, it has just been the two of us his whole life. And to see him stand up and do what he believes in and go through adversity and continue to believe in Jesus, who has just walked him through his entire life, and how he now is giving back based on what he has learned and some of the adversity that he has had. And what brings a smile to my face is just his continued faith and the influence that he has in other people as a result of the adversity he's had in his life. And just just being able to impact people. I think that just anytime somebody says, wow, I never thought of it that way, I just say, thank you for the gift.
Well, thank you for the gift of being here today. I appreciate it, Wendy. And this has just been, you've been a wonderful and inspiring guest. So
My
thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you. And
Well, go ahead.
keep on healing.
I will. I
I'm
will.
glad I got to be your first interview back.
Yes. Well, that's all the time we've got. So we are dropping the mic and we are out. Hey guys, thanks for listening to or watching the Changemaker podcast today. Greatly appreciate it. If you're listening and you want to see the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deke Copenhaver. That's a pretty easy to remember, I would think. But really, we also want to remind you to like, subscribe, rate across all platforms, download. And if you're looking for a coach, a speaker, or anything, you know where to find me. Just email me at dekecopenhaver.com. And thanks so much for listening.